A while ago, I told you about a story of an old acquaintance of mine who was an incredibly gifted and sincere person, a deep, devout Chassid and Jew, and a brilliant mathematician. His name was Rabbi Avraham Michal HaSofer. I met him in Boston. Boston, the center of intelligentsia, had brought Professor HaSofer to figure out problems that the math department in MIT had not been able to find a reasonable way of explanation. So he came postdoctoral as a visiting professor from Sydney, Australia, from the University of New South Wales. Professor Sofer wasn't born religious. He was born to secular parents from Egypt. He studied sciences and during the War of Independence made bombs, made ballistics for the army. His wife, TORAH, was a psychologist by trade, was a judo expert and taught judo to the girls and to the guys. Professor HaSofer was a member of a team of scientists in the late 60s, early 70s, to make a survey of the South Pacific. South Pacific was where America and other nations had detonated nuclear weapons, thermonuclear weapons called hydrogen bombs. And the fear was that the radiation would cause mutations within the species in the oceans, and monsters of the deep would come out to destroy the world. And they wanted to know whether this actually could take place, and so they had Professor HaSofer with some other scientists take the survey. And they found millions, I think about 3 million mutations. Took years, but they found 3 million mutations, but they found not one new species. That's significant, because the theory of evolution is based upon gradual mutations, gradual changes in the cell, in the genome, and that as the years go by, the more mutations, eventually you have different species. But they discovered not one new species, nothing major, after 3 million mutations. Professor HaSofer had to make the statistical model as to how long the possibility of evolution, macroevolution, would take. And his conclusion was, given the variables, given the fact that millions of mutations had not caused one new species, that the mathematics was so prohibitive that it was mathematically impossible for evolution to have ever taken place, given the 3 to 4 billion years that life was supposed to have been able to come onto this earth. He presented his findings at the university for all of the professors. While he was talking and presenting these facts, which were incontrovertible, the professor of biochemistry started to cry. He thought he had offended him, and after the lecture, he went over to him and asked his forgiveness. He didn't mean to offend him in any way. Or what was it that he didn't like? He says, "You don't understand," said the professor, the other professor. "When I was 9 years old, I hated going to Sunday school. And now, what happened was, I decided I was going to believe in Darwin and in evolution, and I wouldn't have to go again to Sunday school. And now, you've disproved Darwin, and I might have to go to Sunday school." This was the level of intellect of a tenured professor in a major university in the 20th century. The reason why there are professors of Bible criticism other than anti-Semitism, the reason why so many people promote Darwinism, evolution, as the explanation for life on Earth, has nothing to do with truth, but has to do with this professor of New South Wales. If there is no evolution, you have to believe in a design, an intelligent design. Intelligent design implies that there's a designer, a creator, who creates by design, by wisdom. As Maimonides says, God and his wisdom are one. God is wisdom. Wisdom is God. So, the fear on the intelligentsia, the reason for professors being liberals and denying religion, denying God, denying the Bible. Sometimes it has to deal with anti-Semitism, as the Nazis clearly stated, that Christianity and biblical values are the antithesis of National Socialism, of fascism. But the reason why people are afraid to accept the Bible is because maybe they're going to have to wear a beard like me and tzitzis and start keeping Shabbos and eating kosher. So because they don't want to do that, they don't want to even entertain the possibility that it's true. People who come back from the dead report about a spiritual world. Nobody wants to hear them. Psychologists do studies on past life regression and have thousands of cases to prove that these things actually happen to those people. And people just poo-poo them. I don't believe it. What do you mean you don't believe it? The man's just as secular as you are, the psychologist. Professor Wugler, Other Minds, Other Lives, in the 70s, published in the 70s, was a Jungian psychologist or psychiatrist, and decided that the evidence was overwhelming for past life regression, that there were past lives that people could tap into. Where is the discussion of past lives found, besides in India? The answer is in the Torah, but not in the ordinary Torah, but in the Kabbalah, in the writings of the Ari and other Kabbalists. People say, that's just voodoo. It's not voodoo. It's a discussion of the continuity of life. The reason why people don't want to accept it is, again, if you're going to accept it, then you have to accept that there is a God, that there is a spirit, that there's a right and a wrong, and that we are obligated to follow. And this is the problem of Korach and his henchmen. They wanted to determine their own course, their own rules. They didn't want to say that openly. It doesn't sound nice. So what did they do? They said that Moses made the rules up. Sound familiar? Bible critics. Korach and his men were like the Bible critics, like the professor of biochemistry in University of New South Wales. If you accept the premise that Moses is right, then you'll also have to accept the premise that you have to follow the commandments. And that's what they're frightened of. So, my friends, I began a class on the Bible codes. We will talk about them in future videos. But you don't have to be afraid. Truth is not something to be afraid of. It's either true or not true. That's the first question. If it is true that there really are codes in the Torah, if it is true that there really is a soul, if it is true that people can relive past lives, if it is true that evolution could not have taken place, then there had to be intelligent design and a designer. And there has to be a purpose for our existence in the world and a purpose for the Jewish people. A purpose other than just getting fat and doing whatever you pleased, but rather a purpose of the designer. And what is that purpose? We'll discuss in the future time. But the first thing is we must accept the designer. We must accept Moses. We must accept his Torah. We must accept that there is a divine wisdom.